Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Jordan at Afterburner Automation, and today we're going to be taking the first course on the string package. By the end of this course, you should have a basic understanding of strings, including where they can be used, how to create and manipulate them, as well as how to use them to set conditions in your if and loop commands. More specifically, you'll know how to convert number variables to string variables, as well as how to use the assign, generate random string, lowercase, substring, trim, and uppercase commands to manipulate your string variables. Like I mentioned in the previous course, string variables are used to hold text. Another way to put that so it makes more sense is that string variables hold strings of characters, or several characters together. These strings of characters can then be used with other commands to be written into files, entered into website fields, or searched for specific characters, words, or phrases. Strings are definitely the most common variable that you'll use, because as human beings, we typically store data in a form that we can understand, which is text. So if you're reading data from an Excel spreadsheet or a PDF, it'll almost always be in string format. A lot of times, you only want to perform certain actions if the data you're looking at matches some other predefined text. For example, you might only want to send emails to employees that have a status of new hire in the company database. In that case, you'll need to get their employee status, store it in a string variable, and check to see if what's in that variable matches the words new hire before your bot performs some action. Other times, you might need to build or separate strings based on what you're doing. For instance, maybe you have a string variable with a full name in it, like Jordan Perales, but you need to name a file after the last name only. The string package allows you to separate the full name so that you can store just the last name in a variable. But you can also add to a string variable. Say you need to write customer, and then the full name. The string package will let you prepend or append text to existing string variables to get that done. You can even tell your bot to just keep a certain number of characters, trim off the spaces at the beginning and end, or change to all upper or lowercase. Real quick before we get started, I want to clear up a common misconception about numbers that are stored in string variables. I know it's a little confusing since there's also a number package that we'll be going over in the next course, but there's a big difference when a number is stored in a string variable versus when a number is stored in a number variable. When you have a number in a string variable, it's treated like text and not like a number. Number variables are used to perform mathematical operations on numbers, so you could do something like 2 plus 3 equals 5. The thing is, A360 needs to know that your variable's a number variable before it can do that math. If you have 2 and 3 stored as strings, you'll have to convert them to numbers first using the string to number command that I'll be showing you in the number 201 course after this one. I'll also show you how to do the reverse, converting a number to a string by using the number to string command in this course. I know it's weird to show you number commands in the strings course and string commands in the numbers course, but I promise it'll make more sense this way for you. If you get confused, just keep in mind what I said earlier, that strings are used to read and write text, no matter what that text is. Anyway, let's get started with some hands-on work. For this course, we're going to pretend that we work for the continuous improvement department at a large company. Every day we get a zip file that contains several customer feedback forms. We need to loop through each file to grab the first name, last name, comments, and the customer's status of new or returning. We then need to trim off any white space around those values, uppercase them, and cut them all down to a maximum of 64 characters so that they can be uploaded to a database. Then, we need to create a unique, random 4-character customer ID and precede it with new dash or RET dash, depending on their customer status. We'll then need to lowercase that customer ID so that it's differentiated between the customer-provided data and our automatically generated data. Then, we'll store each customer in either a new customer or returning customer CSV file. Now that's a lot to handle, so to sum up, we need to automate the following steps. Loop through each PDF file in the extracted zip folder, extract the first name, last name, comments, and customer status from that PDF, trim off the white space around all 4 fields, uppercase all 4 fields, keep all 4 fields under 64 characters, create a unique random 4-character ID number, add new dash or RET dash to the front of the ID depending on the status, lowercase that finished ID, and then log the customer data to new customer or returning customer.csv. To build this bot, you'll need the customer feedback forms zip file that I stored in the resources tab below this video player. If you don't already have that downloaded, go ahead and pause the video and download it, then come back so that you can follow along. Anyway, let's get started. Now that you have the customer feedback forms zip file downloaded, go ahead and open File Explorer and navigate to it. For me, my downloads go straight to the Downloads folder, so I'll find it there. Then, we need to extract everything from the zip file by right-clicking on the file and clicking Extract All. A window will pop up showing us where these files will be extracted to, but I'm going to click Browse so that I can put it in a different spot. I'll navigate to the desktop and then create a new folder. I'm going to call it JD01. Once I've created that folder, I'll click on it and then click Select Folder in the bottom right so that my files all get extracted to that folder. I'll also check the Show Extracted Files When Complete checkbox if it's not already checked so that I can see the files when it's done. And then I'll press Extract. A new File Explorer window should appear showing all of the customer feedback forms, and if I scroll down to the end of this folder, I'll see that there are exactly 100 of them. Let's go ahead and keep this window open for now, but we can close the other File Explorer window from earlier if we want. Then, let's open Chrome to the A360 control room and log in. Once we're logged in, let's navigate to the Automation section. Here, we need to create a new subfolder under the main Bots folder in the left sidebar. Now that we're in the Junior Developer Learning track, we'll need to call this folder Junior Developer. Now that we're inside of our new Junior Developer folder, let's create a new bot. Since we're working on customer feedback forms, let's call this bot JD01-Customer Feedback. That will take us to the RPA workspace, where we can go ahead and start by figuring out how to loop through each customer feedback form. If we go back to File Explorer and look at our JD01 folder, you might notice that every file has the same name, except that after the last underscore they're numbered 1 through 100. That tells me that we can use a simple iteration loop to grab each file. So let's head back to the RPA workspace and grab a loop command from the Actions sidebar, then drag that into our code. It's already set to loop for n times, but let's change the number of times from 10 to 100 so that we can get each of our 100 customer forms. We'll also need to know which iteration of the loop we're on so that we can grab the right file, so we'll need to assign the current value to a variable. Go ahead and click on the Create Variable icon to the right of that dropdown. And then let's call the variable file number so that we can remember what it's for. Before you click Create and Select though, let's talk a little bit about some good variable practices. As you start to write more complex bots, you'll start to notice that even with descriptive variable names, it'll start to become more and more important to be able to tell the variable type at a glance. To keep track of the type of variable, we can start to use a naming convention for our variables. Let's go to the beginning of our file number variable to show for this. First of all, I like to start all of my variables with a lowercase v for variable, so that it's really easy to look at any command and tell what's a variable and what's not. Then, I like to put a 3 or 4 character abbreviation for the type. In this case, since it's a number variable, we can put num in all lowercase. The descriptive part of the variable name should be in camel case, which means that we don't have any spaces, and each word starts with a capital letter, so that it's a little easier to read. It's called camel case because the uppercase letters kind of look like humps on a camel. Now we can see at a glance that this is a variable because of the v, that this is a number because of num, and that it holds a file number inside of it. Once you've added this naming convention or something you prefer, go ahead and click Create and select. So now we have our loop assigning the current count of the loop into our vnum file number variable. So let's start extracting the fields we need from each file. If you took my PDF 101 course in the Citizen Developer Learning track, this should already be familiar to you, but let's do this together anyway. We'll need a PDF extract field command. So let's head to the Actions sidebar and navigate to the PDF package. Once you've got that open, drag the extract field command inside of our loop so that we're extracting the fields for each file. The options appear on the right sidebar, and for the PDF path option, we'll select Desktop File, since our files are stored on our local computer. Then let's click Browse to select one of our customer feedback forms. Once the Select File window opens up, navigate to the desktop where we created our JD01 folder. Then, navigate inside of it. We'll select the first customer feedback form and press Open. This puts the full path to customer feedback 1 into the PDF path, but if we leave it like that, we'll just be working on the same file 100 times. If we want to work on each form one at a time, we'll need to replace the 1 at the end of the file name with our vnum file number variable. So let's scroll to the end of the path and delete the 1. Then, press F2 to bring up the Insert a Value pop-up. If we click on the drop-down, we'll notice that vnum file number isn't there. That's because we need to use a string type variable in this PDF path field, but vnum file number is a number type variable. We can actually convert numbers into strings though, and that brings us to the first command I want to teach you, which is actually a number command and not a string command. Click anywhere off of the drop-down to close it, then click No Cancel on the Insert a Value pop-up so that we're back in the RPA workspace. Let's head over to the Actions sidebar and navigate to the Number package. Inside, you'll see a toString command. This command takes number variables and turns them into string variables, which is exactly what we need. Let's drag that command into our loop, but just above the PDF extract field command, so that we can convert that variable before we need it. In the Options sidebar on the right, you'll see that this is a pretty simple command. First, we need to give it a number variable in the Enter a Number field. Go ahead and click inside that field, and then press F2 to bring up the Insert a Value pop-up. Open the drop-down, and now we should see vnum file number in the list. Select that variable and press Yes Insert to put it into the Enter a Number field. Next, we need to enter the number of digits after the decimal. This is the number of decimal places we want our string variable to show. You can see below that it has a little hint about how it works. If you have a number like 35.265, then the number of digits after the decimal is 3. What the hint doesn't tell you is that we can make it show more or fewer digits than the number actually has after the decimal point. For instance, if we were using the same number, 35.265, and we put 1 in this field, then our string variable would have 35.2 in it. If we put 5, then our string would show 35.26500. In this case, we don't want any decimals, so we'll leave it as 0. Finally, we need to assign the output to a variable. When this command executes, it won't actually change anything about vnum file number. Instead, it's making a copy and converting that into a string. So once we're done with this command, we can make changes to one variable and it won't affect the other. We don't have a variable to store this in yet, so let's click the Create Variable icon to the right of the dropdown. For the name, let's make it easy on ourselves. We're storing vnum file number in a string, so let's put a lowercase v for variable, then lowercase str for string. We'll keep the descriptive part of the name as file number, so that it's really easy to see that these two variables hold the same thing, but one is in string form and the other is in number form. Once you've got the variable named, click Create and Select to assign it as the output for our number to string command. Now we can go back to our PDF extract field command and use it in the PDF path. Click on that command. Then scroll to the far right of the PDF path and put the cursor to the right of that last underscore, but still to the left of the .pdf where the number 1 used to be. Now let's press F2 again. This time we should see our new vstring file number variable in the dropdown. Go ahead and select that and click Yes Insert to put it into our PDF path. Now we can continue on with this PDF command. The file isn't protected, so we can leave that option set to No, but we don't have any fields in the Extract Fields option yet. To start on that, let's click the Open PDF Viewer button just below that table. The Select a PDF File pop-up appears, and again, we'll be selecting Desktop File, since our files are on the local computer and not in the control room. To pick the file we want to use, let's click Browse. We'll need to navigate to the desktop again, and then into our JD01 folder. But this time, you can select any of these files, since they're all in the same format, and all we need to do is use one to mark the fields we want extracted. Once you have one selected, go ahead and click Open. Then, click on Load on the Select a PDF File pop-up. This brings up the PDF Viewer screen, which you'll remember from the PDF 101 course if you took the Citizen Developer Learning track. We'll head up to the top left region of this window and click on the Draw a Region icon. Then, use the cursor to click and drag a box around the New or Returning field on the PDF itself. A little menu will appear, and we'll click Add Custom Region to add this field to our list of fields to extract. The Custom Region window will appear with a lot of options grayed out, and we'll know we selected the field correctly if we see the correct word in the Value Preview box just above the Key Name field. If you don't see anything in that field, you'll need to click Close and then remove that custom region from the Extract Fields table and redraw the region. Ours is working well though, so let's go to the Key Name field. This is the name we're giving this field, so let's keep it the same as the form itself and call it New or Returning. We'll need to do this 3 more times for the other fields on the form. So let's go ahead and draw a region around the first name field. Click Add Custom Region again. Verify that the customer's first name is in the value preview, and then set the key name field to First Name. Once you're done, click Close. Next, we need to draw a region around the last name field. Click Add Custom Region again. Verify that the customer's last name is in the value preview, and then set the key name field to Last Name. Once you're done, click Close. Finally, we need to draw a region around the Comments field. Click Add Custom Region again, and verify that the comments are in the value preview. Be extra careful with this one since it's a lot longer than the others. We'll need to be sure that the whole paragraph got captured, but once you've verified that, let's set the key name field to Comments. And then click Close. We'll see all 4 of our selections in the fields on the right with their different key names. And then click Close on the top right of this window. Now we have all 4 of our fields showing up in the Extract Fields table, but we still need to save the outputs to a variable. We can select to put them in a dictionary or multiple variables. But let's leave this as multiple variables, since we haven't learned about dictionaries yet. Then, we just need to click the Add Variable Mapping button, keeping in mind the key names we set up when we extracted the fields. The variable mapping window will appear, and we'll just need to set the key name with our first extracted field, which we called New or Returning. Then, we need to map it to a variable, but since we haven't set one up yet, we'll click the Create Variable button to the right of the dropdown. Since we already typed the key name in, it'll automatically show up as the name of our new variable. So we'll just need to add vstr to the beginning and delete any spaces. I'll also uppercase this OR so that we're in camel case, and then we can click Create and Select. That takes us back to the variable mapping window, where we can click Add. That maps the text we extracted from the New or Returning field to the vString New or Returning variable, and we can see it in the Mapped Variables table. But we still have 3 more fields to map: first name, last name, and comments. Go ahead and add all 3 of those now, and remember to add vstr to the beginning of each of your variable names so that you can easily tell that they're string variables. Okay, now that we're done mapping the extracted fields to our new variables, let's test it out. To see if our extractions worked correctly, we'll need to see if the correct values are in our 4 new variables, so let's print them to the screen with a message box. I'll head over to the Actions sidebar, find the message box package, and bring a message box command into the bot just after our PDF extract field command, but still inside of the loop. For the message to display field, let's click inside and press F2. Then we'll select our vString New or Returning variable and press Yes Insert. Once that gets inserted into our message box, let's click in that field again and add a new line by pressing Enter. Then we'll go ahead and add our vString First Name variable. This time though, instead of pressing F2, I want to show you a little shortcut. You've probably noticed already that variables are surrounded by $signs. We can actually type a $sign and then start typing the variable name. I'll type VSTRF. You'll notice that a little menu pops up with the variables that start with these letters. Right now it's showing vString file number and vString first name. We can use the mouse to click on that variable name, or we can use the arrow keys to select the vString first name variable and press Enter or Tab. That automatically adds the variable to our message box without needing to press F2 and scrolling through the list of all variables. This can be especially useful if you need to add a lot of variables quickly, or if you don't want to switch back and forth between the mouse and the keyboard when you're adding variables. And it'll be even more convenient a bit later on when I teach you some other tricks, so it's good to get into the habit now. Let's do that again for the next variable. First, I'll press Enter after the first name variable, put a $sign, and then I'll start typing vString last name. Since this is the only variable that starts with VSTRL, it's the only one that appears in the menu, so I can go ahead and press Enter or Tab to add it. I'll be adding variables this way from now on, but you feel free to use whichever method you like best. Go ahead and put the last variable, vString comments, as the last line of the message box now. Now that we have our message box set up, let's click Run and see what happens. After the bot loads, our message box appears, and you should be able to see all 4 of the expected values in the message box. Looks like our PDF extract field command is set up correctly, but we already know from the PDF 101 course that new lines get added at the end of each extracted field, which is why there's a blank line in between each variable. We'll need to trim off any white spaces, like spaces or new lines, from both sides of those new variables. But first, let's kill our bot so that we can get back to work. Otherwise, our bot will loop 100 times and we'll have to close 100 message boxes. There's 2 ways to do this. On the bot running window on the bottom right, we can click the X next to the pause button. Don't confuse it with the X button that closes the whole window, because if you close the bot running window itself, that can sometimes cause problems with the control room. The other way we can stop the bot is by moving our message box out of the way and clicking the Stop button on the running bot window in the middle of the screen. This is a lot easier to do when the bot's paused like this, because if the bot's in the middle of running, sometimes you'll get all kinds of screens popping up preventing you from doing that. Either way, go ahead and stop the bot and close the message box now. Now we can learn a new command to trim off the white spaces we need to get rid of. Let's head over to the Actions sidebar and navigate to the String package. Inside, we're going to grab the Trim command and drag it into our code right after the PDF extract field command, but before our message box. I'm leaving that message box in there for now so that we can test our bot as we add new features. Anyway, the Options sidebar appears, and we can see at the top what this command does. Trims blanks and white spaces from a given string. So basically, we give this command a string or a string variable, and it'll trim any spaces, new lines, or tabs from the beginning and end and put it into a variable. Let's start with the source string field at the top. We need to do this for all 4 variables, but let's start with our first one, vString newer returning. Add that variable to that field using whatever method you like. Then, let's look at the 2 checkboxes here. We want to trim white space from both sides of the string, so we can leave both of these boxes checked, but in the future, if you only need to trim off the beginning or the end of a string, you can select those options here. Then, we need to assign the output to a variable. We could create a new variable to hold the trimmed version of vString newer returning, but instead, let's put it back into the variable we just trimmed by opening the dropdown and selecting vString newer returning. This is one of the really cool things about variables that I wanted to show you. Basically, anytime you use a command on a variable, you have the option to store it back into the original variable. So when we run our string trim command, it takes the variable with white spaces, trims it, then overwrites whatever's in vString newer returning with the new version. This is a great feature for when we need to manipulate the values inside of a variable, but be careful. Once you overwrite what's in that variable, the original value is gone, so if you need to keep whatever's in a variable, save the output to a new variable instead. Anyway, now we've trimmed the white spaces off the beginning and end of vString newer returning, but we need to do that 3 more times for the other 3 fields we extracted. So let's click anywhere off of this command so that it'll populate. Then we'll copy-paste that string trim command 3 times. I'll go ahead and select the second one, and then I want to show you another cool feature. First, I'll double-click on vString newer returning. And you'll notice that it selects everything inside of the $signs. Now I can just start typing the next variable I want to trim, which is vString first name. Once it shows up in the menu box above, I'll select it and press Tab. Then I just need to change the output variable to vString first name, and then we're done with this command. Go ahead and do that 2 more times, once for vString last name and again for vString comments. Now that we have all 4 fields being trimmed, let's test it out again by clicking Run. This time, you'll see that there aren't any blank lines in between our different variables because they've all been trimmed off. That finishes up that step. So now we can uppercase everything so that we know it came from the customer. Go ahead and kill the bot, and let's head back to the RPA workspace. To make our strings all uppercased, let's head back to the action sidebar and go to the string package again. This time, grab the uppercase command and let's drag it into our code just after our last trim command, but still before the message box. This command is extremely simple because all it does is make everything uppercased. We just give it a source string and then assign the output to a variable. The command will do the rest. So let's start with the source string field. Again, we're going to start by adding the vString new or returning variable. And then we'll assign the output back into itself. So I'll select the vString new or returning variable. Let's do this for the other 3 variables also, just like before, by saving this command by clicking anywhere else, then copy-pasting it 3 times. Then update the source string fields and output fields so that we're uppercasing vString first name, vString last name, and vString comments. Now that we're uppercasing all 4 variables, let's make sure they're working by clicking Run again. Now we can see that our trimmed variables are all uppercased, so it looks like we're good to go. Let's kill the bot again and head back to the RPA workspace. The next step for our bot involves cutting each field down to a maximum of 64 characters so that it can be uploaded to a database later. This is a pretty common issue with databases, since they can only hold a certain number of characters in each field, but you may need it in other cases as well. To do this, we're going to again head over to the Actions sidebar and grab a Substring command from the string package. Let's drag this command over to the main workspace and put it between our last uppercase command and our message box. This command extracts what's called a substring from any string. A good example is the word bell tower. The whole string is bell tower, but bell is a substring of that string because it's a part but not all of the word bell tower. Tower would also be a substring, as well as any other group of consecutive letters that are a part of the word bell tower. The keyword there is consecutive, meaning they need to be next to each other. So while bell is a substring of bell tower, belt is not, because we skipped the letter L to make it. However, that also means that individual letters can be substrings. So any individual letter in the string is a substring of that string. Anyways, let's take a look at this command. Looks like it's also pretty simple, with a source string, then a start from and length, and the assign it to an output. Let's start with the source string. It says that this field is optional, which might sound strange, but if we leave this field blank, then it'll basically just put a blank value into whatever variable we assign the output to. We actually want to get a substring from our variables though, and we know we need to do this for all 4 variables, so let's again start with vString new or returning. Add that variable using your preferred method, and then we'll move on. For now, let's skip the start from option and go to the length option. This is also an optional field, but it controls the length of the substring we want back. We know that we need each variable to be no longer than 64 characters, so let's set this to 64. Now let's head back to the Start From field, so that both of these will make a little bit more sense. By default, the Start From field is set to 1. That means that it'll start building the substring from the first character in the string. Let's use the word bell tower as an example again. If we were to set the Start From field to 1 and put a length of 4, then it'll start the substring with the first letter, B, and count out 4 characters so that our substring is B-E-L-L. If we were to set the Start From field to 2, then it would start with the letter E, which is the second letter in the word, and give us a 4-letter substring. That means that our substring would be E-L-L-T. Looking back at our need, if we set Start From to 1 and give it a length of 64, we'll be cutting off everything after the 64th letter, which is exactly what we're trying to do. The last thing we need to do for this command is assign the output to a variable. Just like the other commands, we want to set this to the same variable that we used in our source string, so let's set it to vstring new or returning. Now we need to repeat this process for the other 3 variables, so let's click anywhere away from this command so that it populates, then copy and paste the command 3 times and change the source string and output variables to vstring first name, vstring last name, and vstring comments. Alright, now that we're done with that, let's test it again by clicking Run. Once the message box pops up, most everything will look the same, but you'll notice that the comments variable is significantly smaller because we took off everything after the 64th character. The other 3 variables are unaffected because they're smaller than 64 characters, but we should leave our substring commands in place for those variables anyway, just to be safe, in case someone has an extremely long name. Let's go ahead and kill the bot again and head back to the workspace. The next step in our process is to create a unique, random 4-character customer ID. Let's start by focusing on the random part, and then we'll come back to the unique part in a minute. Head over to the Actions sidebar and into the String package. Let's grab the Generate Random String command. We'll drag this after the last substring command, but before the message box command. This command gives us a random string variable, and this can be a mix of numbers and letters. We need to set the length, so let's set that to 4 since we only need a 4-character ID. Then we need to assign it to a variable, but we don't have a good variable to hold this just yet, so let's click the Create Variable icon. And we'll create a variable called vstring ID. That takes care of the random part of our ID number, but what about making sure it's unique? To do that, we need to keep track of what IDs have already been created, and then check to see if our newly generated ID matches any of the ones that have already been created. Let's start by keeping track of the IDs that have already been generated. To do this, we can build a string variable that holds every ID that the bot creates. To do that, we'll need to try out a brand new string command, so let's head back over to the Actions sidebar and find the string package again. This time, we'll use the assign command, which is the first one on the list. So let's drag that over into our code just after our generate random string command on line 16, but before our message box command on line 17. The description that appears at the top of the right-hand sidebar says that this command assigns or concatenates the given strings. What that means is that we can assign any string variables or string data into another string variable. To do that, we just put whatever values or variables we want into the source string field, and it'll all get stored into the destination string variable that we select from the dropdown. We can also leave the source string field blank, and that'll make our destination string variable blank as well. This is also referred to as setting a variable to null, since the variable won't hold anything at all. Anyway, we want to keep a running list of every ID that we create, so let's put our new vString ID variable as the source string variable. For the destination string variable, we don't have a good variable just yet, so let's click the create variable icon. And we'll make a new variable called vstridlist. Now we have the value of our new vString ID being set as the value of vString ID list. But each time we loop through, this will just overwrite whatever is already in vString ID list with the new vString ID. If we want to add it to our vString ID list variable instead of overwriting, we'll need to add the original vString ID list variable to our source string field, along with the vString ID variable. Let's go ahead and put our cursor after vString ID in the source string field. And then add the vString ID list variable. If we think about it, this means that each time that we loop through the list, the new ID and the current ID list will get put back into the ID list variable. So our vString ID variable will be added to the front of that string. If we were to put vString ID list first and then vString ID, then vString ID would get added to the end of the vString ID list variable. Either way, now we have a running list of all the IDs that we create in this bot, so now we can check and see if the random string we generated is in that string. It might seem like we need an if command for this, but if we think about it, if vString ID list already has our random ID in it, we want to try again and get a new ID until we generate one that isn't already in vString ID list. Sounds like a job for the loop command. So let's head over to the Actions sidebar again and grab a loop command. Then we'll drag it into our code above the generate random string command on line 16. Then we can drag our generate random string command inside of our new loop. Like I said, we want to keep generating new IDs until our new ID is not in vString ID list. But another way to say that is that we want to loop while our new ID is in vString ID list. With that in mind, let's select while as the loop type here. And for the dropdown, we're going to go to the string section and select string condition, since we want our loop to continue while a certain condition is met with our vString ID and vString ID list variables. Before we set our source value and target value fields, let's open the operator dropdown and see what options we have. There are 4 options here: equals to, not equal to, includes, and does not include. Equal to and not equal to look for 2 strings to be exact matches or not, but includes and does not include look for substrings in the source value that match or don't match the target value. That's perfect for what we need, because we want to keep generating a new ID while vString ID list includes vString ID. Go ahead and select includes from the dropdown. Next, let's set our source value to vString ID list. Then, let's set our target value to vString ID so that we're checking if vString ID list includes vString ID. There are also a couple of checkboxes here. The first one, match case, will make sure that it only keeps looping if it finds the same string of characters with the same case in vString ID list. If we go back to a previous example, let's say we want to keep looping while the word bell tower in all lowercase includes the word tower in all uppercase. If we had the match case checkbox checked, then it will not loop at all, because while bell tower does contain the word tower, the cases don't match because the tower found in bell tower is not uppercase. If we use the same example but we uncheck the match case box, then our loop will keep looping because it found the same characters, even if their case doesn't match. For our bot here, we need to uncheck this box because if we look ahead in our steps, we're going to be lowercasing this ID in a little bit. If we only generated a new ID if we found a case-matched ID in vString ID list, then it's possible that we could generate the same ID, just with different cases, and that would cause us to have a duplicate ID later on. Anyway, the next checkbox is Ignore Carriage Return. And for those of you who don't know, a carriage return is a special character that you usually don't actually see in text. When you press Enter to start a new line of text while you're typing, your computer actually does two things. It moves your cursor to the next line, but it also returns it to the beginning of that new line. A carriage return is the behind-the-scenes character that symbolizes returning to the beginning of the line, and even if you don't actually see it, it exists in any text where you've pressed Enter to start a new line. That means that if we're checking for matches across multiple lines of text, we may want to check this box. But in almost every case, including this one, we can leave it unchecked. There's also buttons for adding conditions and groups, but we'll take a look at both of those in later courses, so let's leave them alone for now. Underneath that though, there's a checkbox that says, check the condition at the end of the iteration. This checkbox determines if we check our condition at the beginning or end of the loop. In our case, we want to generate the new vString ID before we check if it's already in vString ID list. So let's check this box to put it at the end. I know I'm kind of moving past this point pretty quickly, but I'll be going over that concept in more detail in the Loop 102 course, so we can move on for now. Anyway, let's test our bot again, but before we do, let's open our messagebox command on line 19 and add our vString ID and vString ID list variables to the top of our list of variables. We're putting them above everything else so that we can see them without scrolling down past everything else that we've already tested. Just make sure you press Enter in between each variable so that each one starts on a new line, or it'll be difficult to tell them apart. Once you've added vString ID and vString ID list to your message box, go ahead and click Run. The first time our message box pops up, vString ID and vString ID list will be the same because we generated vString ID and added it to vString ID list, which was empty at the beginning of the bot. Then, if we click Close on the message box, the main loop will continue and a new message box will appear with different customer information. This time, we can see that our new ID is prepended to vString ID list, with the previous vString ID still stored in that variable. Let's click Close one more time, and we'll see that the vString ID list now has 3 IDs in it, and all of them are unique. Looks like this is working correctly, so let's kill the bot and go back to the workspace. Our next step is to add NEW- or RET- to the beginning of our ID number, depending on what the customer's status is, new or returning. If vString new or returning is set to new, then we'll add NEW-, but if it's set to returning, we'll add RET-. Looks like we need an if command, so let's head to the Actions sidebar and grab one from the if package. Then, drag it into our code after our string assign command on line 18. In the condition dropdown, since we want to check what's inside of a string variable, let's select the string condition. You'll notice that this looks pretty much just like the loop while command from earlier, with all the same options. In this case, we're checking if vString new or returning is set to new, so let's put our vString new or returning variable in the source value field. The operator dropdown is already set to equals to by default, so we can leave that alone and just type new into the target value field. Let's go ahead and also uncheck the match case checkbox, because we don't really need to get that specific with this check. We'll also need to check the other condition, which we could do with an else if command, but in this particular case there are only two types, new or returning. If the variable isn't equal to new, then we already know that it has to be returning, so let's save some time and use an else command instead. We'll head back to the Actions sidebar and grab the else command from the if package, then drag it inside of our if command on line 19. Now we need to put the new- or ret- prefix onto our vstring ID variable. This will work a lot like when we added vstring ID to vstring ID list. So let's go back to the Actions sidebar and grab an assign command from the string package. This one can go inside of the if vstring new or returning equals to new part of the if command. So let's go ahead and drag it over there. For this assign command, we know that we need to add new to the front of our vstring ID. So let's go ahead and type new- in the source field. Then we'll add the vstring ID variable to that field as well, without putting any spaces. Then we'll select the vstring ID variable from the dropdown, so that it overwrites what was in that variable with our new version that has the prefix included. Now we need to do the same thing for our else command. So let's click off of this command so that it populates, and then copy paste it into the else command. All we have to do here is change new in the source string field to ret, and we're done with this step. Once you have that done, let's click Run again to see what happens. The first customer is a returning customer, as we can see from the third line, and it added ret- to the beginning of the ID, which is just what we wanted. Let's close the message box and see what happens on the next one. This customer is a new customer, and it added new- to the beginning of the ID, so we know both of our conditions are working here. Let's go ahead and kill the bot and finish this up. Only 3 more steps to go, and the next one's a real easy one. We just need to lowercase our customer ID so that it's different from the customer provided information that we uppercased earlier. Let's head over to the Actions sidebar and grab a lowercase command from the string package. This one can go right before our message box on line 23, but make sure that it doesn't go inside the if command. To make it a little easier, I'm going to collapse that if command first. The lowercase works exactly like the uppercase command we learned earlier, except that it'll put all of the characters in lowercase instead of uppercase. So for the source string, let's put vstring ID, and then we'll select the same variable from the assign the output dropdown. Since this command isn't too complex, I'm not going to test the bot this time. Instead, let's move on to the next step. We need to store each customer in either a new customer or returning customer CSV file, which we can do pretty easily with a log to file command. Let's head to the Actions sidebar and grab one from the log to file package. Then drag it right before our message box command on line 24. For the file path, let's click Browse. Then we'll navigate to our JD01 folder on the desktop. I'm going to select one of the PDFs in here and click Open, because I want the path to that folder. But then I'm actually going to go back to the file path field and scroll over to the PDF file name. Then replace it all with customer.csv. But that's not good enough, because depending on if this is a new or returning customer, we'll need to log it to a CSV called new customer or returning customer. Fortunately, we already have a really cool way of doing this by using the vString new or returning variable, which should always have the word new or returning in it. And at this point in our code, it'll be in all caps. So with that in mind, let's put our cursor right before customer.csv and then add in our new vString new or returning variable. Now it'll always log to the correct CSV based on what it finds in that field on the PDF. For the enter text to log field, we need all of the customer information. So let's put in all 5 variables separated by commas. vString ID, comma, vString new or returning, comma, vString last name, comma, vString first name, comma, and finally, vString comments. We want this log to get appended to the file that currently exists, so let's make sure that the when logging option is set to append and not overwrite. We'll probably want some headers as well though, but we only want to log those if the file doesn't already exist. So let's grab another if command from the actions sidebar and put it right before our log to file command on line 24. For the condition dropdown, let's scroll down to the file section and select file does not exist. Then we need to go back to our log to file command on line 25 and copy the file path there. Then we can paste it back into that if command. Now we have our if condition set up, so we can copy the log to file command from line 25 and paste it inside. We just need to change the enter text to log field so that we put the actual headers in there instead of variables. So let's erase everything to start out with, and then just start typing some headers separated by commas. ID, comma, status, comma, last name, comma, first name, comma, and comments. Now our bot is all set up to get the information and log it. But real quick, let's delete that message box on line 27. Once you've done that, click Run and let's see what happens. It should run super fast, so let's go take a look at the work it did by opening up File Explorer and navigating back to our JD01 folder. Inside, the 2 output files should be all the way at the bottom. Let's open the new customer file. Looks like it worked to only put new customers into this file, and all the customer info is uppercase while all our IDs are lowercase, but there's a problem with the comments. Looks like they got spread over 3 separate columns instead of all into one column. That happens with CSVs sometimes, because CSV stands for comma separated values, and the comments themselves have commas in them. We can fix that though. Let's go ahead and close this file. Then we'll delete it, and delete the returning customer CSV so that we can get a fresh run after we fix this. Once those files are deleted, head back to the RPA workspace and open up the log to file command on line 26. We need to make sure that vString comments all gets put into the same column, and to do that, all we need to do is put vString comments inside of double quotes. This tells the CSV that even though there are commas in the text we're logging, we don't want to separate them. Once you've put double quotes around vString comments, let's click Run again and see if that fixes it. Alright, so now that the bot's done, let's go back to File Explorer and open that same new customer file. If I expand the rows, I can see that our comments are now all inside of the comments column, commas and all. There should also be a total of 55 rows here, including the headers. Let's close this file and open the returning customer file. Looks like this one's correct as well, with everything in the right columns and only returning customers. This file should have 47 rows, which it does, so we're good to go. Great job! And that's it! Now you know how to use string commands to manipulate string variables by changing the case, trimming off white space, and extracting substrings. You also learned how to convert number variables to string variables, and how to generate random strings of any length, and how to use the assign command to add text to the beginning or end of a string variable. Just be careful when you use if commands or loop while commands to compare strings. If you have that match case checkbox checked, then you might not get the outcome you want. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. For more RPA training, check out the next video here, or watch everything in order right here. Subscribe to my channel for updates on new content, and become a patron to get access to personalized RPA support. But until next time, I'm Jordan at Afterburner Automation, and I hope this helps you build better bots.